This episode is powered by Act Now Education. Go to www.actnoweducation.com for free comprehensive educational resources and opportunities for active duty, veterans, military spouses, and children. The views and opinions expressed by this episode's guests do not necessarily reflect the views or position of the Department of Defense, Department of Army, National Guard, or Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They are his own views and opinions alone.
And I said, sir, with all due respect, and I was standing in position of attention because I'm addressing my company commander. I said, listen, sir, we in the military have a military uniform. I'm a Sikh warrior, and I have my own uniform, which includes my articles of faith. And throughout history, Sikhs have died when people try to force us to cut our hair and shave and remove our articles of faith, and we would not do that. And I'm really proud of our heritage, and that's something that I would want to keep as long as I'm serving in the military, and I would not be willing to cut my hair and shave.
Thank you for joining us today. Today I'm going to be co-hosting this episode of The Morning Formation with Avi.
Hello everybody, it's good to be here.
We're joined today with a U.S. Army Signal Corps commissioned officer. But unlike many military officers, our guest today is unique. When our guest today is donning the United States Army uniform, some have to do a double take because most serving in the military are clean-shaven, wearing their issued headgear. But unlike most, our guest today, First Lieutenant Kanwar Singh, is a devout Sikh, loves America, sports a full beard with long hair neatly tucked under his turban. In 2011, First Lieutenant Singh attended a speech where Senator John McCain encouraged attendees to serve their country through the military. Shortly thereafter, First Lieutenant Singh took the ASVAB, scored within his top 1%, and sought to somehow join the United States Army without breaking his deep religious belief in Sikhism. In today's episode, we're going to learn more about First Lieutenant Singh, his journey, which ended up challenging a policy that was held in place since 1981 against honoring his religious accommodation. Thank you for joining us today, First Lieutenant Singh.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, KP and Avi.
The honor is all ours, and we're going to start out today with learning a little bit more about you. Can you tell us where you're from, and can you describe what your childhood was like?
Absolutely. Look, I was actually born overseas, and I immigrated to the U.S. At the age of 17. I lived in Virginia shortly thereafter, did my undergrad there, and then also worked for a few years. Realized that I did not like living in a small city in Richmond, Virginia. So I sought out greater pastures by moving to Boston, Massachusetts. And then, as you mentioned, in spring of 2014, I heard a speech by Senator John McCain, who came to my grad school and talked about his service to our nation and his time as a POW. And he encouraged everyone in the audience to consider serving. And then right around that time was also the first anniversary of the Boston bombings. And then I knew the National Guard had played a pivotal role in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombings. So I was inspired and moved and called to action, and I decided to join the military. Growing up in Asia, in South Asia specifically, I certainly knew about the Sikh military history. Sikhs are warriors. Throughout our history, we were persecuted. There had been multiple genocides against us. And so our gurus encouraged us to pick up arms so we could defend ourselves and those around us. So that was always in the back of my mind. And then after I immigrated to the U.S., I certainly remembered that, and I wanted to continue my family history of military service.
Yes, I understand that Sikhs hold military service as a very high priority, and that your family in India also served in the British military. And prior to 2011, had you ever imagined yourself joining the military? And what did your family think about your decision overall when you told them what you planned to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I had actually considered joining the military even in 2007 when I first came to the country. And so there was an ROTC program on campus. And I had some very initial conversations with the folks there, but I knew that I have to give up on my religious beliefs for me to join the program. And so that's why I didn't think much about it. And so it was only about 7 years later in 2014 is when I started rethinking that desire to serve. I must mention there was a pivotal moment that happened in 2012 in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. There was actually sadly an attack on the Sikh community there a white supremacist had actually attacked our place of worship. And that actually was a wake-up moment for a lot of Sikhs in America, including myself, by the way, because obviously for something like that to happen, where someone came in and attacked a peace-loving Sikh community, and their excuse, well, somehow we are affiliated with Al Qaeda and Taliban and other groups. And so I think a lot of Sikhs felt that call to action. Now, not to say, Sikhs have been actually on the receiving end, sadly, of hate crimes ever since 9/11 happened. In fact, as we're coming towards the 20th anniversary of 9/11, a few days after, one of the first Americans to die was actually a Sikh American who was misunderstood. And so Balbir Singh Sodhi, actually in Arizona, was shot dead because of the way he looked. So it was really critical and important for me as a Sikh American after Oak Creek, Wisconsin attack, and then also what I heard from Senator John McCain and the Boston Marathon bombings, to do my part so I could serve in our nation's military. My family, I think they were not opposed to me joining the military, obviously, because they were very supportive of continuing the military history and the legacy that we have as Sikh warriors. I think their bigger concern was the fact that I ended up having to sadly file a lawsuit to join because we were trying diplomatic ways and means to join, and working with members of Congress, and we had bipartisan support, by the way. You mentioned Senator John McCain, who I'll be forever grateful for. His staff and his office was supporting me with working with Pentagon to get me a religious accommodation, and so were my congressional delegation, by the way, in Massachusetts, Senator Ed Markey and Senator Elizabeth Warren, and my representative, Mike Capuano. So all these, members of Congress, along with a bunch of others that I have not named, were very supportive of the Sikh service and the rights and freedoms for other service members of different religious beliefs to be able to serve. And actually, Sikhs have served in the U.S. military for over 100 years, by the way. One of the first Sikhs to serve was a gentleman by the name of Bhagat Singh Thind, who fought wearing his turban and beard and long hair in World War I over 100 years ago.
Wow.
And so, as you mentioned, the policy changed in 1981, and that made it harder for new Sikhs to be able to join with their articles of faith.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. A lot of people probably don't even realize that all the way back to, that time era, there was Sikhs that served in the United States military. And from my understanding, you enlisted in the National Guard in 2015?
That is correct, yes. It's funny because I actually initially wanted to join the Air National Guard, and I called the Air National Guard recruiter, and we had a very pleasant conversation until he found out that I was a Sikh and I was going to need a religious accommodation. And so I basically got ghosted. Never got a phone call back from the guy.
He left you on red, huh?
Yes, I was left on red.
So, Kanwar, before we continue here, can you just explain to the audience what types of religious accommodations had to be made?
Right, absolutely. Look, as Sikhs, we believe God's creation is perfect, and we believe hair is gift from God. And that's why we don't cut our hair or shave. We also keep our hair covered by wearing turban, again, to show respect to God. And so as far as the articles of faith, we were requesting the Pentagon to allow me to keep an unshorn beard and unshorn hair and be able to wear my turban in uniform. We also have other articles of faith. For example, you can see my kara, which is an article of faith, a steel bracelet that I wear on my right arm. We also have kanga, which keeps our hair clean, which is a small wooden comb that I keep in my hair. I also wear a kachera, which are underpants to control your carnal desires. And then finally, the fifth article of faith is a kirpan. It's a small sword to keep yourself and others protected and safe around you. But I think the Pentagon had the bigger issues with the hair and the beard and the turban. They were okay with the other ones, but I think they had obviously issues with the other ones.
So Lieutenant Singh, you enlisted in the National Guard in 2014, and you scored extremely high on the ASVAB, which isn't a huge surprise, seeing that you already had a business undergrad from Virginia Commonwealth University, and you were at the time enrolled at Harvard University, What steps did you take after the ASVAB?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, first off, scoring high on the ASVAB in graduate school, it's not a good comparison, right? Because it's primarily for high school students. And so I worked with my recruiter after the initial enlistment process to request a religious accommodation. And it took us over a year for me to be able to even enlist in the Massachusetts National Guard. And in the meantime, I was working with members of Congress. You certainly mentioned Senator John McCain, and then I also had my congressional delegation in Massachusetts, Senator Ed Markey and Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Mike Capuano and a whole bunch of other people, bipartisan support to ask a simple question, right? The Pentagon, why is it that Sikhs could not serve in the military? So the challenge was, the Pentagon was figuring this out, but even after, they, let's say, allow me to enlist, the question was, well, what would the Pentagon do? Because then they could order me to cut my hair and shave after I signed the dotted line. And I knew I would not do that, but there was no process to request a religious accommodation under AR 670-1, which defines the grooming standards for those of us in the Army. So it was a big bet that I was making, and luckily I had other options, right? So I knew if this religious accommodation did not work out, I would probably leave the Army and find other ways. And this is also one reason I joined the National Guard, because I could not have, taken the risk of joining active duty, because then, that's your career, that's your job, and it would be a lot more painful at that point to try to separate from the military. So it took me a year after going through the initial process. I finally enlisted in August 2015. And then I was segregated from my unit. So after I enlisted, they said, hey, we cannot have you show up for your drill weekends with the rest of the enlistees who were preparing to go for basic training because you look different. And it felt pretty bad, actually, at the time, having been segregated and separated. So I would come in the middle of the week and shred paper in an office because they had no idea what to do with me, right? And so I did that for about 9 months or so. And then there was a meeting that I got pulled into with my commander at the time in April of 2016, which was, by the way, a month before I was supposed to ship off for basic training. And the commander, really, an incredible person who I respect. And he said, listen, Specialist Singh, because I had enlisted as a specialist, I had a college degree. He said, I know the answer to this question, but I've been asked to ask you this question, which is, would you be willing to cut your hair and shave so we can send you to basic training? And I said, sir, with all due respect, and I was standing in position of attention because I'm addressing my company commander. I said, listen, sir, we in the military have a military uniform. I'm a Sikh warrior, and I have my own uniform, which includes my articles of faith. And throughout history, Sikhs have died when people try to force us to cut our hair and shave and remove our articles of faith, and we would not do that. And I'm really proud of our heritage, and that's something that I would want to keep as long as I'm serving in the military, and I would not be willing to cut my hair and shave. So then I had, by that time, assembled a legal and policy team, and then I let them know what had happened, and they asked me to visit them, and then I visited them a few days later, and then we had to end up, sadly filing a lawsuit because that was the only option left, or else I could have been ordered to cut my hair and shave, and that would be violating my religious beliefs.
Great story there, Kanwar. I really admire how even though you had all of these different challenges, you were still able to both enlist in the military and have your accommodations met.
Right. And when you were accepted into the Officer Candidate School, otherwise known as OCS, did the National Guard again ask you to heed the grooming standards? And what did you do to maintain your religious dignity?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So first off, I never had to give up on my religious beliefs. So what had happened is after we filed the lawsuit, within 2 weeks, the Army actually backtracked and issued me a religious accommodation, which was an interim religious accommodation. I got an email. I got a voicemail message, and I was working at the time. I was teaching class. And so I did not take that phone call, but I got the voicemail message and I listened to it afterwards. It was actually from my lawyer. And she said, hey, congrats, Kanwar, your religious accommodation has been issued. Make sure you're preparing for basic training. And that was the best news ever, right? Because I did not think that would be possible, and I was so grateful and happy. But that's when it, hit me that, oh my gosh, I'm going for basic training next month. I have no idea what to expect. And so right around that time, I was about to graduate. I was working on 2 master's degrees at the time. So things were really busy school-wise and career-wise. But then obviously being the National Guard, we have to transition from civilian life to military life. I probably was not very prepared, to be very candid, for basic training, but I went through basic training. I did okay in there, and then I came back, and then I was then sent to officer candidate school. The good thing is my religious accommodation was made permanent in January of 2017. And so that allowed me to attend OCS and my future Army positions without having to give up on my sincerely held religious beliefs.
So what type of backlash, prejudice, or negativity have you received since making your decision to join the United States military? What was basic training like for you, and how was officer training?
Yeah, look, I was treated just like any other soldier. So I was smoked just like everyone else. I was one of the team, right?
That's what I'm talking about.
and I have to admit, basic training was rough. OCS was rough because they really wanted to ensure that all of us earned the title of soldier and then afterwards officer, right? I wish I had done the ROTC program, or I had gone through federal OCS, which are considered, softer and lighter, and they don't smoke you as much, right? Or smoking is not the right term. Corrective training, right? They don't give you as much corrective training.
It's okay.
So, I remember showing up for basic training, and again, I had no idea what to expect, right? So I'm showing up, and I like to sleep a lot, right? I like to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And I show up, I'm like, when are they going to let us sleep? And I'm there and I'm hallucinating. And I'm like, what the heck, man? I haven't slept, and I'm falling asleep, standing in line in chow formation. And it was bad, right? I was sick, during the first 3 weeks of red phase in basic training, just because, there were germs everywhere, and we were all like, stressed and sleep deprived. I had never seen anything like that. And I must confess, there were moments during basic training or OCS when I wanted to quit, right? And there were certainly people who around me who quit. You could simply, ring the bell, or you can just raise your hand and say, hey, I do not want to do this. And then all of that sleep deprivation and the physical pain would stop, right? But I realized that, hey, as a Sikh warrior, this is what I signed up for. And as a Sikh warrior, we don't quit. So when it came to my graduation ceremony, both from basic training and also officer candidates school, I was emotional on both days because I knew how hard I had to work to get to those points, right? Basic training, I remember I'm thinking, man, it took me 2 years just to get here, right? Whereas for other recruits, it may have been just a matter of a few weeks between when they signed the dotted line and when they actually were able to complete basic training. Same thing in officer candidate school. I think we started with 35 officer candidates in our program, and I think 17 of us commissioned. And there were some, by the way, we had a Bronze Star recipient in our class, by the way, who quit OCS. And I'm like, man, if guys like these who are combat veterans are quitting, what's going to happen to me? But luckily, we had a good support system in our class, and we looked out for each other. When I was down, someone tried to cheer me up. If they were down, I tried to cheer them up. It was teamwork, right? And personally, I was committed because I knew how hard I had to personally work to get to that point. And I was going to be the last person to quit. They would have tried their hardest, and I still would not have given up because that's how much I wanted to commission and become an officer.
So I also want to ask you this. Where did you go to basic training?
I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina in summer of 2016. I have never been so hot in my life before.
Did they have mulch pits or sand pits?
On the firing range?
No, for the smoke sessions.
Oh, the smoke sessions. I'm not sure like how they did it, back in the day, but for us, they would just make us do push-ups. Like I remember day 3 after all the in-processing stuff happened. We had like multiple heat casualties. People were falling. And then I was scared of the drill sergeant, but I'm like, hey, my battle buddy just passed out. So I'm running there to drill sergeant, trying to stand at parade, rest, and trying to ask them, hey, drill sergeant, my buddy just collapsed. We need medical attention. And I thought they were gonna, smoke me for coming and not doing push-ups at that time. But I'm like, man, this guy's gonna die if I don't get him some medical help. So
I remember for me in basic training, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, and they had a big mulch pit behind our barracks. And I remember one time they're like, all right, privates, today we're gonna make granola bars, and they told us that at the beginning of the day. And by the end of the day, we had a long day at the range. It was sweaty, hot, we're tired. Yeah. They're like, all right, privates, it's time to make granola bars. And so they took us into this room, made us like PT, do push-ups and jumping jacks and everything else. And then they opened up these doors that went to the back of the barracks where that mulch pit was. And they were like, all right, get in the mulch pit and roll around. And we rolled around, and the mulch would stick to you. And so they were making granola bars. That's
hilarious.
But it was like, oh, this sucks, but it was so funny. Like I was laughing while I was like rolling around, because like these guys are something else. But
well, see, that's the thing, right? I mean, I agree with you, and it is funny while you're in the moment, but then you're like, why are they doing to us? And then you see the next class come in. So, by the time you get to green phase or whatever, I mean, you're in the red phase, you see the other class coming in, and these are games, right? They're trying to whittle out the weak people, which actually makes sense because we are the military. I mean, you want the strongest people mentally and physically to complete these trainings. But yeah, I mean, it was funny in hindsight. But in that moment, you're like, why is this happening? I mean, especially for me, I mean, who was not mentally ready for that kind of situation.
Right.
Now, Kanwar, just want to say before this next question, every step of the journey that you've detailed to us so far has been a true testament to every inhibition, obstacle, and problem you've had to overcome just to serve America's military. And despite immigrating to America and having your religious accommodations turned down after so many attempts, it is truly an inspiration to see how dedicated you were to serving the country despite all of these problems. And personally, I'm in a tough situation here as well, because I am missing fingers on my left hand. I'm West Indian, and there are a couple other factors as well that are all pushing me away from trying to get into the Air Force. But you were truly inspiring to me to help follow through with that ambition. So awesome anecdotes. But for any of the listeners out there who are not familiar with Sikhism, where does the religion originate? What are the basic beliefs? And can you talk about some of the additional points that many of us may not understand or be knowledgeable of?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. First off, Avi, I would encourage you to keep going down this path of trying to serve. I know the military can be pretty rough when it comes to medical waivers and things like that. But if you keep trying, if you're passionate about the path, and this is for anything in life, not just military, by the way. If you want something in life, go get it. I had never done a marathon in my life before. And then 2018 came around, and there was an opportunity to be part of the Boston Marathon. And I'm like, hey, what? I'm going to do this. And I was in a lot of pain afterwards. But if you commit to something and you're passionate about it, you make it happen, right? But to answer your other question, Avi, Sikhism originated in South Asia, what's present day, Pakistan, India region. It used to be one region before it got split. And so our founder, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, had a very simple mission in life. His goal was to bring people together, to eliminate hate in our society, to get rid of the caste system that existed, to get rid of the discrimination that existed in society where women didn't get equal rights as men. And so he spoke out against a lot of societal inequities. And him and subsequent Sikh gurus also put in place a practice of langar, where anyone can go to a Sikh place of worship, Gurudwara, and they can get a free meal, no question asked. And that was one way of bringing about societal justice and equality by just ensuring that everyone, regardless of your race, ethnicity, religion, color, gender, socioeconomic status, you could simply sit down at any point at a Sikh place of worship and eat, right? So that was a very novel concept at the time, and still is actually. And so Sikhs, we believe in equality of all people and giving back and serving during our course of history. We were also persecuted for our practicing our faith. And that's where our gurus, our leaders encouraged us to become warriors and learn martial arts and be able to defend ourselves and defend others around us. And so we've had a long history of military service, not just in South Asia, but there's Sikhs who are serving in obviously the US military, in Britain, in Canada, in France, in Australia, New Zealand. I mean, wherever Sikhs are, we serve in overwhelming numbers so we can be part of the nation's military and then be able to serve and defend our governments.
Again, truly inspiring words and really showcases your dedication to both your religion and your goals. So amazing balance there. Now, are you aware of any other current Sikhs serving in the United States military?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there are. So one of the things that I'm most grateful for, and this process, this fight to get religious accommodation was never about me. I knew that if the military could discriminate against Sikhs, Sikhs and other religious minorities could not get jobs with, let's say, your local police and fire departments. The military is the largest employer in our nation. And then the other aspect is if the military can discriminate, other employers can do the same, right? And then the military is such a well-respected institution in our nation. If I can't serve and be part of our nation's military, other Americans may consider me as a threat, right? And that, was part of the problem, and I think still is why we see so many hate crimes against the Sikh community, even to this day, because we are so misunderstood in America. But there are hundreds of Sikhs who are serving today in the Army and Air Force with their articles of faith. Now, there's other Sikhs who serve in other branches, but perhaps they don't have a process to get a religious accommodation. But I'm confident in the future we'll probably see Sikhs in the Navy and in the Space Force and Marine Corps and the Coast Guard as well. But what's happened is the Army and the Air Force, after my case happened, they looked at the religious accommodation process in total. And then they said, hey, why is it that we have a policy and process that prevents not just Sikhs, but other religious groups from also serving? And so there are thousands, if not more, of service members, by the way, who are of not just Sikh, but Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Hindu, Jain, Buddhist, pagan, and other religious beliefs that can now request a religious accommodation. Some of them only grow beards. Some of them keep long hair. There was a woman at basic training who was crying, and I went up to her and I said, hey, why are you crying? And she's like, listen, I'm a practicing Baptist and we don't cut our hair. One of the first things that they did to me when I got out here was they chopped my hair. And so I explained to her how she could request a religious accommodation. And I haven't stayed in touch with her, but I hope that she has now been able to work with her chain of command and her chaplain to get a religious accommodation so she can have long hair in uniform. And then that was the whole thing is if we can serve and we can meet our military's high standard, why is it that we have these antiquated grooming policies that don't impact the mission? Right, and that's what we encourage the military to think about. One of the common frustration, or I guess the military's comeback would be, oh well, the gas masks don't work with beards. Well, I'll tell you this: I've gone through the gas chamber multiple times with my standard M50 gas mask. I have never had an issue getting a perfect seal, and every other Sikh soldier that I know who's gone through the gas chamber has never had any issues whatsoever with getting a perfect seal. So if there's no, and by the way, growing a beard does not prevent you from shooting or running or doing other things that the military requires. So that's why I think it's kind of tough for that argument that, we should just do things the way we've been doing it. And I try to, remind folks that you have to change with the times. And by the way, today, there are thousands of additional folks with religious backgrounds of all different backgrounds who are now serving in our military, perhaps who would not have served had it not been for religious accommodations that allowed them to practice their faith without having to give up on them and still serve the country that we all love.
So, LT, I want to ask you, what advice would you have for someone else out there interested in joining the military, for both someone who thinks it might not be for them or another young professional Sikh thinking of following in your footsteps?
Or
Yeah.
even if it's someone like me who's trying to get into a branch of the military, but just is facing obstacles left, right, and center.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, first off, I admire anyone who wants to serve in our military, right? It's not an easy job. As we are finding out with the events that have happened recently in the Middle East, it's a dangerous job. And when each one of us signed the dotted line, we accept that risk. And the way I like to put it is each service member writes a blank check to the United States that includes giving up everything, including their life, right? And I'm going to take a pause to honor and remember the 13 service members that just died in Kabul, and the Marines, and then we had a soldier and a Navy corpsman for their sacrifices and honorable service to our nation. We are free. We are the land of the free because of our military veterans, to include KP, who served honorably in the military before launching this podcast series. So that's why I think everyone should know what they're getting themselves in. I saw a lot of people. I'll share this quick funny story. Day one of basic training, and this guy, as you're being asked to do push-ups, he stands up and he's like, "I'm not doing this anymore because this is not like Call of Duty." I mean, And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, "Man, just come down, do push-ups, because if you stand and you stop doing push-ups, they're going to make us do more push-ups." So I was mad at him. But again, I just started laughing in that moment. I'm like, "Man, what did you think? I mean, did you actually think this is going to be like Call of Duty? You'll be playing video games all day long." But people should know why they're joining and make sure they're joined for the right reasons. And it's going to be hard work. I mean, it's going to be stressful. The training is tough for a reason. And I think it should be tough just so that, we have people who know what they're signing up for and can live through the stress if we are put in a stressful situation. But keep at it. If this is something you're passionate about, I do not regret the decision to join the military. I've received fabulous leadership training through the military and the ability to meet people from around the world. I've learned so much just by being in the military that I think a lot of my friends who haven't served haven't had those experiences. So there's a lot of, benefits you get from the military and appreciation that you get from being part of the military, but you got to do it for the right reasons.
Most definitely agree. And I definitely also cherish and respect anyone willing to step up and sign on the dotted line to serve our country, because it's not an easy thing to do. So what are your ultimate goals? Do you plan to retire from the military, or do you plan to go to active duty? Would you mind sharing some of those goals?
Yeah, well, I do not know at this point. I really like my job as a signal officer in the Massachusetts Army National Guard. I'm also on the innovation team, so I can help out with some innovation initiatives and technology modernization efforts within the Army. I love, leading soldiers. If I was younger, I'm in my early 30s, but maybe if I was younger, absolutely, I would have gone active duty. It's kind of tough when you're settled in and you have another civilian job. But I that's what I love about, being in the National Guard and also for those who are in the reserves, because they can actually have civilian careers in addition to, being in the military. It's tough because you got to juggle them. But I do think there's a lot of value and benefit in being able to have a civilian job as well as a military career, if that's what you choose to do.
Definitely. Now, Kanwar, you're describing something that I plan on doing in the Air Force, modernization of technology. Do you work on the physical technologies in addition to software, or what is your area of expertise?
Yeah, my area of expertise is primarily software, although I have been getting interested in hardware recently, but I'm not a subject matter expert. But I'm certainly fascinated with how we can better leverage technology to meet our military objectives, right? COVID-19 is a great example. Our military was activated. A lot of units within the National Guard specifically, those of the folks who were medics and doctors and nurses were called in for active duty, and still are some actually. Some of them are still doing state active duty or federal active duty to help with the COVID-19 mission. But how can we leverage technology and data to better facilitate our mission, right? And then the same also applies for potential combat missions. Look, I think this is a struggle, and I'm not sharing anything that's classified because this is well known within the military. We're sort of falling behind our adversaries, especially the near peer threats that exist. And I think this is why there's this massive race right now to get better with cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, so we can keep up. Because quite frankly, and this is my opinion, and take it for what it's worth, I mean, I'm not convinced if the next big war is going to be fought, like the previous wars we've had. There's going to be a huge cyber aspect to it. There's going to be a huge AI aspect to it. So I think the more we can train and better understand that and advance ourselves in those domains, the better protected and defended we would be. So.
Definitely. Now, Kanwar, I definitely have to connect with you just to follow you on your journey. Now, for anyone out there who also wants to connect with you and follow you, where can they reach out to you? What platforms are you on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they can reach out to me on Instagram. I'm certainly on there. You can look me up, Kanwar Singh. My username is Kanwar91, and I'm also lately I joined TikTok, and it's been a fun ride. I like the community there. I don't do it on official orders or official military status, right? Because we know the DoD actually has banned TikTok, but I do it in my personal capacity. And my handle over there is Sikh Soldier. So folks can reach out. I've had dozens of people who've reached out to me over the past few months, and I like helping people and answering questions that they may have about the military. If they're trying to join or get religious accommodations or be able to go through any challenges they have. So I love connecting. So feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to connect.
Lieutenant, I want to tell you thank you for giving us your time today, and I want to congratulate you as well. I know you just recently achieved your MS in information technology, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Congratulations on that huge
Thank
achievement.
You.
And for anyone listening out there, I'll make sure that I put all of his contacts down in the show notes as well if you would like to connect with him. You're certainly an inspiration. I'm so grateful and thankful that you agreed to come onto the show as well. But before we end, as your final summary, or do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with everyone listening?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, whatever you're doing in life, it's easy to quit and it's easy to give up. And, times get tough. I know a lot of people are struggling right now, especially during this pandemic. And a lot of our veterans are also struggling with the events that have recently happened. There's some things we can control, and there's some things that we cannot control. I like to think a lot about Sikh warriors. And so there's a battle of Saraguri that happened in 1897. But this battle happened, 21 Sikhs, they were manning a signaling fort in the area of Saraguri, which is on the border of present-day Pakistan and Afghanistan area. And it was a very critical post for the defense of the British forces in that region. And they were surrounded by 10,000 Afghan tribesmen. Just imagine being in that situation, right? There's 21 of you, and you have no reinforcements, you have limited ammo, and you have 10,000 Afghan tribesmen coming towards you, right? And then they make offers to you to quit, to give you bribes, or they give you the ability to peacefully walk out and leave your post. But these 21 Sikhs did not surrender. They did not quit. They said, we're going to fight until the end if we have to, right? And then that day, these 21 Sikhs, they ended up killing 600 Afghan tribesmen. Think about that. And not only that, when they ran out of ammo, they pulled out their kirpans, which is one of the articles of faith, and they got into hand-to-hand combat with these Afghan tribesmen.
Wow.
And so the last person who was on the radio, he requested his colonel to give up on the radio on the signaling communication and be able to fight, because he did not want to be captured. And he's like, you know what, I'm going to die, but I'm requesting permission so I can kill some of these people, right? So in that moment, these 21 Sikhs could have had a lot of things going on, right? And they may have just said, hey, this is too hard, and quit and go home and whatever, surrender. But they said, no, we're going to focus on the task at hand, because this is what we can control. This is what we cannot control. You got to remember what you're true to yourself. And once you know what you're true to yourself and your values, you go fight for those values. So that's the last thing I want to leave the audience with. Regardless of the situation you're in, regardless of what you're going through, always remember there are things you can control and there are things you cannot control. Focus on things you can control, and everything else, if you believe in God, hopefully God will take care of it. If you don't believe in God, destiny will take care of it. All right.
Absolutely fascinating. I love the warrior mentality that you bring to the table. I love how you coordinate a lot of the things from your own family history to today's United States military, and definitely extremely fascinating. And that's why I wanted you on the show today. And I really appreciate your time. And LT, I'm looking forward to following you and furthermore into your journey. And as for the morning formation, thank you everyone out there listening. I hope that you're intrigued by this, and please follow Lieutenant Singh on his social platforms as well, and reach out to him if you have any questions about anything. If you're at a spot in life where you're not sure if the military is for you, or you're going through a hard time getting into the military, listen to his story as a means of inspiration. So as for the Morning Formation podcast with Avi and Lieutenant Singh, we're going to call it a show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And we're out. You've been listening to the Morning Formation podcast. I hope you found today's materials helpful and of value to your current situation. You can connect with me on Instagram at _morning_formation_podcast, or you can connect with me via email at theformationpodcaster@gmail.com. Also, I would like to thank my partners at Act Now Education for their support. Authenticity, community, and trusted is what you can expect from all members of the Act Now Education team. You can link up with them today and learn about some new, free educational resources on their Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or at their website, actnoweducation.com. Whether today's show took you back to a nostalgic time or helped you think about tomorrow, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again. Stay safe and stay motivated. Warriors, fall out.